Welcome to A Year of War and Peace. I'm your host, Brian E. Denton. A Year of War and Peace is a daily, year-long, chapter-by-chapter reading of and meditation on Leo Tolstoy's epic novel, War and Peace. In these videos and podcasts, you'll be treated to a free reading of one chapter per day of the novel, plus a reflective essay I've written individually tailored to that day's chapter. These readings are offered for free, though if you'd like to support me, you can do so in one of three ways. First, you could purchase my ebook, A Year of War and Peace. It features the entire novel, plus all of my reflective essays, and it's only $2.99 on Amazon.com. You could also become a patron at patreon.com/BrianEDenton. If you sign up there, you'll receive a sonnet once a month, plus a link to an ebook of my collected sonnets. Finally, if you like, you can make a one-time donation to my PayPal account. The email there is brianedenton@gmail.com. You can also use that email to contact me. I'd be happy to hear from you. Your support is greatly appreciated. Today's reading and reflection is from chapter 296. Chapter 296. One of the most obvious and advantageous departures from the so-called laws of war is the action of scattered groups against men pressed together in a mass. Such action always occurs in wars that take on a national character. In such actions, instead of two crowds opposing each other, the men disperse, attack singly, run away when attacked by stronger forces, but again attack when opportunity offers. This was done by the guerrillas in Spain, by the mountain tribes in the Caucasus, and by the Russians in 1812. People have called this kind of war guerrilla warfare, and assumed that by so calling it they have explained its meaning. But such a war does not fit in under any rule and is directly opposed to a well-known rule of tactics, which is accepted as infallible. That rule says that an attacker should concentrate his forces in order to be stronger than his opponent at the moment of conflict. Guerrilla war, always successful, as history shows, directly infringes that rule. This contradiction arises from the fact that military science assumes the strength of an army to be identical with its numbers. Military science says that the more troops, the greater the strength. Les gros bataillons ont toujours raison. For military science to say this is like defining momentum in mechanics by reference to the mass only, stating that momenta are equal or unequal to each other simply because the masses involved are equal or unequal. Momentum, quantity of motion, is the product of mass and velocity. In military affairs, the strength of an army is the product of its mass and some unknown X. Military science, seeing in history innumerable instances of the fact that the size of an army does not coincide with its strength, and that small detachments defeat larger ones, obscurely admits the existence of this unknown factor and tries to discover it, now in geometric formation, now in equipment employed, now and most usually in the genius of the commanders. But the assignment of these various meanings to the factor does not yield results which accord with the historic facts. Yet, it is only necessary to abandon the false view, adopted to gratify the heroes, of the efficacy of the directions issued in wartime by commanders, in order to find this unknown quantity. That unknown quantity is the spirit of the army, that is to say, the greater or lesser readiness to fight and face danger felt by all the men composing an army, quite independently of whether they are, or are not, fighting under the command of a genius, in 2- or 3-line formation with cudgels or with rifles that repeat 30 times a minute. Men who want to fight will always put themselves in the most advantageous conditions for fighting. The spirit of an army is the factor which, multiplied by the mass, gives the resulting force. To define and express the significance of this unknown factor, the spirit of an army, is a problem for science. This problem is only solvable if we cease arbitrarily to substitute for the unknown X itself the conditions under which that force becomes apparent, such as the commands of the general, the equipment employed, and so on, mistaking these for the real significance of the factor. And if we recognize this unknown quantity in its entirety as being the greater or lesser desire to fight or to face danger, only then Expressing known historic facts by equations and comparing the relative significance of this factor, can we hope to define the unknown. 10 men, battalions, or divisions, fighting 15 men, battalions, or divisions, conquer, that is, kill or take captive all the others, while themselves losing 4, so that on the one side 4 and on the other side 15 were lost. Consequently, the 4 were equal to the 15, and therefore 4x equals 15y. Consequently, x divided by y equals 15 over 4. This equation does not give us the value of the unknown factor, but gives us a ratio between the two unknowns. And, by bringing variously selected historic units, battles, campaigns, periods of war, into such equations, a series of numbers could be obtained in which certain laws should exist and might be discovered. The tactical rule that an army should act in masses when attacking and in smaller groups in retreat unconsciously confirms the truth that the strength of an army depends on its spirit. To lead men forward under fire, more discipline, obtainable only by movement in masses, is needed than is needed to resist attacks. But this rule, which leaves out of account the spirit of the army, continually proves incorrect and is in particular striking contrast to the facts when some strong rise or fall in the spirit of the troops occurs, as in all national wars. The French, retreating in 1812, though according to tactics they should have separated into detachments to defend themselves, congregated into a mass because the spirit of the army had so fallen that only the mass held together the army. The Russians, on the contrary, ought, according to tactics, to have attacked in mass, but in fact they split up into small units, because their spirit had so risen that separate individuals, without orders, dealt blows at the French without needing any compulsion to induce them to expose themselves to hardship and dangers. All right, and that concludes my reading of chapter 296. I will now proceed to my reflection on the same. A Year of War and Peace, day 296. The Unfailing Antidote, Solving for X. Tolstoy has a problem. One can picture him in his study, surrounded by history books and treatises of military science, pondering the question of how the Russians, inferior of force and weaker of experience, came to repel and defeat Napoleon's Grande Armée, the world's preeminent war machine. The Russians, like nearly all of Europe before it, should have fallen before the march of the mighty French offensive. But they didn't. Instead, it was the French who retreated, cowering with their baguettes back to gay Paris. In his reading on the subject of war, Tolstoy learns that the strength of an army is the product of its mass and some unknown variable, X. Contemporary historians and military theorists, Tolstoy notes, believe they have solved this martial equation by substituting in the genius or foolery of military commanders for X. This is the great man theory of history Tolstoy argues against in War and Peace. The great man theory, for Tolstoy, gets it completely wrong. According to him, X is equal to the spirit of the army. The spirit of the army is hard to define, but Tolstoy describes it as being, quote, the greater or lesser desire to fight and to face danger, end quote. Our world is war. Mere existence marshals its unflinching forces against us. While time rallies an ever-present and all-consuming wasting attack, desire commands infecting spirits of disappointment, and attachment unleashes an ineffable melancholy, tracking our fondness for the transitory. What then is our X, the spirit upon which we can shore up our defenses in this struggle? Our bulwark is wisdom and virtue. Prince Andrew came to understand this. Wisdom and virtue, manifested as love and forgiveness in his case, offered Prince Andrew calm waters in which to disembark for the next life. Pierre, Natasha, Maria, and Nicholas remain with us. We wait to see if they too can solve for X. Daily Meditation. Fix your gaze upon wisdom in all things, for it is an unfailing antidote. Baha'u'llah, Tablets of Baha'u'llah. All right, that concludes my reading of and reflection on chapter 296 of War and Peace. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks so much for listening. Remember that if you'd like to support me, you can do so either by purchasing the ebook A Year of War and Peace, becoming a patron at patreon.com, or making a one-time donation at PayPal. The links to all that are down below. You'll also find links below to my Amazon wishlist for books and movies if you want to get me one of those and to show your support for me and your appreciation for what I'm doing. That'd be great. And if you do, we'll set up a Zoom call or something to talk about the book or the movie that you choose for me. At any rate, your support is greatly appreciated. Tomorrow we're going to be reading and reflecting on chapter 297 of War and Peace. I hope you'll join me. Until then, take care of yourselves and others.